They called me the Cinderella of the Vance family, but tonight, I was going to show them that even ashes can burn fiercer than any diamond. The lobby of the Grandeur Hotel stretched before me like a marble cathedral, its crystal chandeliers casting pools of golden light across the polished stone floor. Jazz music drifted through the air, smooth and sultry, mingling with the murmur of Chicago's elite in their evening finest. I paused at the entrance, my medium-priced rolling suitcase suddenly feeling heavier than it should. Not shabby, but certainly nothing that screamed wealth. Exactly as I had planned. I spotted Scarlett immediately. She was impossible to miss, really, standing in the center of the lobby, like a peacock displaying its plumage. Her crimson evening gown hugged every curve, the kind of dress that cost more than most people's monthly rent. She was laughing, that high-pitched sound that always grated on my nerves, surrounded by her usual entourage of sycophants and social climbers. Tiffany Carter stood at her elbow, whispering something that made the whole group erupt in laughter. The moment Scarlett's eyes landed on me, her expression shifted from mirth to something between disgust and amusement. The transformation was so swift, so practiced, that I almost admired the performance. Almost. "Oh my God," she announced loudly, her voice carrying across the lobby with deliberate projection. The freelance designer finally decided to grace us with her presence. "I thought you were still buried in that ratty little studio of yours, hunched over a computer like some kind of basement dweller." Tiffany's laugh was sharp and cruel. Several heads turned our way, curious about the commotion. I felt the familiar heat of embarrassment creeping up my neck, that old instinct to shrink, to apologize, to make myself smaller. For years, I had mastered the art of invisibility in Scarlett's presence. But tonight was different. Tonight, everything was different. I opened my mouth to respond, to offer some mild deflection that would diffuse the situation, but Scarlett was already moving toward me. Her heels clicked against the marble with aggressive precision. Without a word, without even a flicker of hesitation, she reached out and grabbed my suitcase handle. The smile never left her face as she yanked it from my grasp and hurled it across the lobby floor. The crash echoed through the space like a gunshot. My suitcase hit the marble with a resounding thud, skidding several feet before coming to rest near a decorative column. Conversation stopped. Heads turned. The jazz pianist even missed a note. "This place isn't for cheap luggage, Mia," Scarlett said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Don't contaminate the atmosphere with your bargain bin aesthetics." The silence that followed was suffocating. I could feel dozens of eyes on me, waiting to see how the poor relation would react to being humiliated in public. This was Scarlett's favorite game, one she had perfected over the years. Make me small, make me grateful for whatever scraps of belonging she deigned to throw my way. I walked slowly to my suitcase, each step measured and deliberate. I bent down, wrapped my fingers around the handle, and stood back up. I brushed an imaginary speck of dust from its surface, my movements careful and unhurried. Inside, something cold and sharp had settled in my chest, something that felt remarkably like satisfaction. Her breath still smells of arrogance, I thought, but tonight, it will turn to ashes. "Miss Vance?" The voice that cut through the tension was deep, warm, and unmistakably authoritative. Or should I say, "Miss Amelia?" Nathaniel Thorne emerged from the private elevator bank, moving toward us with the confident grace of someone who owned not just the building, but possibly the entire block. His silver hair was perfectly styled, his charcoal suit impeccably tailored. But it was his eyes that held everyone's attention, the way they softened with genuine respect as they settled on me. "I apologize for any inconvenience, Miss Vance," he continued, and the entire lobby seemed to hold its breath. "Your executive penthouse is ready, and all of your special requests have been prepared exactly as specified." I watched Scarlett's face drain of color. It was beautiful, really, the way confusion and disbelief played across her features like a silent film. Tiffany's mouth had fallen open in a rather unflattering way. The laughter had died completely, replaced by a silence so profound I could hear my own heartbeat. I allowed myself a small, cold smile. "You were right about one thing, Scarlett," I said, my voice carrying just enough to be heard by our growing audience. "This place isn't for cheap things. It's for people who own it." I slipped my hand through Mr. Thorne's offered arm, and together we walked toward the gold-plated elevator. I did not look back. I did not need to. I could feel Scarlett's stare burning into my back, could practically taste her shock and envy in the air. It was intoxicating. The journey in my life that had led to this moment had not been easy. For 28 years, I had been the Vance family's afterthought, the daughter my mother Eleanor had with her second husband after my father died. Scarlett, 10 years older, had always been the golden child, the one who could do no wrong. Beautiful, charming, married to money, and utterly convinced of her own superiority. I had spent my childhood watching her bask in mother's attention while I learned to be invisible. I had spent my teenage years being her errand girl, her emotional punching bag, her convenient scapegoat whenever something went wrong. And I had spent my early 20s sacrificing my own dreams and ambitions to support a family that barely acknowledged my existence. When I received the scholarship to the Art Institute of Chicago, Scarlett had laughed in my face. Art school? She had sneered. How delightfully bohemian. I suppose someone has to be the family disappointment. Mother had said nothing, just pursed her lips in that way that suggested she agreed but was too polite to say so. I had gone anyway. I had worked 3 jobs while studying, living in a tiny apartment that barely had heat in the winter. I had survived on ramen and ambition, pouring every ounce of my being into my designs. While Scarlett attended charity galas and spa retreats, I was hunched over drafting tables at 3 in the morning, perfecting the skills that would eventually define my career. The breaking point had come 6 months ago, at Mother's birthday dinner. Scarlett had announced her engagement to Bryce Sterling, a wealthy investment banker with political connections. The whole family had celebrated, toasting to her success, her beauty, her perfect life. I had sat at the end of the table, invisible as always, until Scarlett turned to me with that familiar cruel smile. "You know, Mia," she had said, her voice carrying across the table, "I was thinking you could design the wedding invitations. Free, of course. It would be good practice for you. Though I don't know if your little hobby can handle something this important." My little hobby. The words had struck me like a physical blow. For 5 years, I had been quietly building Parker Studio Designs, my architecture and design firm. I had won awards. I had secured prestigious contracts. I had made something of myself entirely on my own merit, and she had dismissed it all as a hobby. "Actually," I had said quietly, surprising myself, "I'm working on a project that requires all my attention right now. Perhaps you could hire a professional." The table had gone silent. Scarlett's eyes had narrowed. "Excuse me?" I said no. The words had felt foreign in my mouth, rebellious and dangerous. "I'm sure you can afford to pay someone. You wouldn't want free work from a hobbyist anyway, would you?" The explosion that followed had been spectacular. Scarlett had accused me of jealousy, of spite, of trying to ruin her special day. Mother had looked at me with disappointment, asking why I couldn't just do this one thing for my sister. Bryce had seemed confused by the entire scene, but had dutifully supported his fiancée. I had left that dinner early, my hands shaking, my heart pounding, and I had made a decision. No more. No more being small. No more being grateful for crumbs. No more pretending that their treatment of me was normal or acceptable. The project I had been working on was the expansion of the Grandeur Hotel, one of Chicago's most iconic properties. Nathaniel Thorne had sought out Parker Studio Designs specifically, impressed by my portfolio and vision. He had no idea I was a Vance, and I had kept it that way, using my professional name and staying out of the social circles that Scarlett inhabited. The Skylight Rooftop Restaurant had been my masterpiece, a space that seemed to float above the city, all glass and light and impossible elegance. It had taken months of planning, countless revisions, and more than a few sleepless nights. But when it opened last month, the reviews had been unanimous. It was stunning. And tonight was its grand debut for the public, coinciding perfectly with Mother's 70th birthday celebration. Scarlett had insisted on hosting the party there, crowing about her connections and influence. She had no idea that every beam, every light fixture, every carefully placed table bore my signature. The penthouse suite was everything Mr. Thorne had promised. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Chicago's glittering skyline. The furnishings were elegant without being ostentatious, each piece selected to complement the space without overwhelming it. I set my much-maligned suitcase on the luggage rack and allowed myself a moment to simply breathe. My phone buzzed. A text from Mr. Thorne. "The dress has been delivered as requested. Take your time. The reveal will be worth the wait." I smiled. Oh, it would be worth the wait indeed. 2 hours later, I stood before the mirror in the penthouse bathroom, barely recognizing the woman staring back at me. The emerald green gown fit like it had been painted on, its subtle shimmer catching the light with every movement. My dark hair was swept up in an elegant updo, secured with diamond pins that Mr. Thorne had insisted were a gift, a token of appreciation for my work. They probably cost more than my first year's salary. But it was not the dress or the jewelry that made me pause. It was the look in my eyes, confident, fierce, unapologetic. This was not the Mia who had cowered at family dinners. This was Amelia Vance, architect and designer, a woman who had built her success from nothing and owed no one an explanation. The Skylight Rooftop was exactly as I had envisioned it, but seeing it filled with Chicago's elite made my heart swell with pride. The space seemed to float in the night sky, the city lights providing a stunning backdrop. Candles flickered on tables draped in white linen. The gentle murmur of conversation mixed with soft classical music from the string quartet in the corner. And there, at the center table, sat my family. Mother looked regal in her navy gown, her silver hair perfectly coiffed. Scarlett held court beside her, gesturing animatedly as she told some story. Bryce sat on her other side, looking bored. Various aunts, uncles, and cousins filled the remaining seats. I stepped out of the elevator, and the change in atmosphere was immediate. Conversations faltered, heads turned. I saw shock, confusion, and in a few faces, recognition. The restaurant manager, who had worked closely with me during the design phase, smiled broadly and immediately began walking toward me, but I held up a hand, stopping him. I wanted to make this entrance on my own terms. I walked slowly, deliberately, letting them all see me, letting them wonder. The woman in emerald green who commanded attention with every step. Scarlett spotted me first. Her animated expression froze, her mouth slightly open in the middle of a word. I watched the color drain from her face, then return in a rush of angry red. "That's impossible," she hissed, loud enough for half the room to hear. "How did you get in here?" I reached their table and smiled, that same cold smile I had perfected in the lobby. "Hello, Scarlett. Hello, Mother. Happy birthday." Mother blinked at me, clearly struggling to reconcile the elegant woman before her with the daughter she had dismissed. "Mia, is that really you?" "It's Amelia, actually," I said softly. "I've been using my full name professionally. I thought I mentioned that." Scarlett stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "This is ridiculous. This restaurant doesn't just let anyone walk in off the street. Security!" She looked around wildly, searching for someone to remove me. "Oh, Scarlett," I said, my voice gentle but carrying an edge of steel. "I didn't walk in off the street. I walked in through the private elevator, the one reserved for VIP guests and, of course, the designer." "Designer?" Bryce spoke for the first time, his brow furrowed. "What are you talking about?" I signaled to a waiter, who immediately approached with a bottle of champagne, the expensive kind, the kind Scarlett always made sure to order. "Please send Mr. Thorne my compliments and let him know that Amelia Vance has arrived, and prepare the best champagne you have for my table." The waiter nodded, clearly knowing exactly who I was. "Of course, Miss Vance, right away." Scarlett's face had moved beyond red into something approaching purple. "Your table? You're delusional, Mia. You can't even afford to eat here." Before I could respond, Nathaniel Thorne appeared, and his presence was like dropping a stone into still water. Every conversation in the vicinity rippled into silence. He moved toward our table with purpose, his eyes warm as they found mine, then cooling considerably as they swept over Scarlett. "Miss Vance," he said, taking my hand and kissing it in a gesture that was both old-fashioned and unmistakably proprietary. "I'm delighted you could join us this evening. I trust your mother is having a lovely birthday celebration?" Mother made a small noise of surprise. "Mr. Thorne, I didn't realize you knew my daughter." "Knew her?" His eyebrows rose in genuine surprise. "Mrs. Vance, I'm not sure you understand. Miss Amelia Vance is not only the principal investor in the Granger's expansion, but she is the lead architect and designer for the entire project. Without her vision, her expertise, and her considerable talent, this restaurant would not exist. Neither would the renovated conference center, the expanded ballroom, or the reimagined guest suites. This entire venture was her creation." The silence that followed was so complete I could hear the champagne bubbles popping in someone's glass 3 tables away. Mother's face had gone slack with shock. Bryce was staring at me with new interest, reassessing everything he thought he knew. Several cousins were whispering frantically among themselves, but it was Scarlett's expression that I savored most. Disbelief, denial, and growing horror warred across her features. She looked between Mr. Thorne and me, trying to find the trick, the lie, the angle that would make this make sense. "That's impossible." She finally managed. "Mia is just a freelance designer. She works out of some tiny studio. She doesn't have this kind of money or connections. You're mistaken." Mr. Thorne's smile was polite but cold. "I assure you, Miss Sterling, I am not mistaken. Parker Studio Designs is one of the most sought-after architectural firms in the Midwest. Miss Vance has personally overseen projects totaling over $300 million in the last 4 years alone. Her work on the Grandeur represents an investment of nearly $200 million from various sources, including her own considerable portfolio." I watched Scarlett's world crumble in real time. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. She groped for her chair, sitting down heavily. "But," she whispered, "you were always so broke. You borrowed money from me. You lived in that awful apartment. You worked those terrible jobs." "Yes," I said simply. "I did, because I was investing every penny I earned into my education and my business. Because I was building something real instead of spending Daddy's money on designer handbags and luxury vacations. Because I understood that real wealth isn't about what you spend, Scarlett. It's about what you create." Bryce was looking at Scarlett now with an expression I had never seen directed at her before. Disappointment. "You never told me your sister was so accomplished," he said quietly. Scarlett's head snapped toward him. "She's not my sister. She's just Mia. She's nobody." "Scarlett," Mother's voice was sharp, embarrassed. "That's enough." But Scarlett was beyond reason now, standing again, her hands clenched into fists. "No, I will not accept this. She's lying. She's always been a liar and a schemer. This is some kind of trick, some kind of fraud. She probably seduced him or blackmailed him or something. That's the only way someone like her could get this far." The ugliness in her words hung in the air. Several nearby diners had stopped even pretending not to listen. Mr. Thorne's expression had turned to ice. Miss Sterling, he said, his voice cutting through her hysteria, I would advise you to be very careful with your next words. Making defamatory statements about my business partner in public could have serious legal consequences. Every contract, every design document, every financial record bears Miss Vance's signature and proves her ownership stake in this project. There is no deception here. The only illusion was the one you created in your own mind about who your sister truly is. I had not planned what happened next. The words just came, rising up from some deep well of suppressed pain and anger that I had been carrying for decades. Do you remember, Scarlett? My voice was quiet, but it carried. Do you remember the day you threw my first design portfolio in the trash? I was 17. I had spent 6 months putting it together for college applications. You told me I was delusional, that I would never be anything but a dreamer with silly fantasies. Scarlett's face went white. I don't... Or the time you laughed when I got my scholarship to the Art Institute? You said it wasn't prestigious enough, that I should have aimed for something more ambitious if I really had talent. You told all your friends at dinner that I was going to a community college for arts and crafts. Mother's hand had risen to her mouth. Mia, I didn't know. And my favorite, I continued, my voice steady, despite the emotion threatening to crack it, was when I told you about my first major contract, the renovation of the Hartley building. You told me that the only reason I got it was probably because the owner felt sorry for me. You said I would never make it on my own merit, that I was riding on sympathy and pity. The tears in Scarlett's eyes could have been remorse, but I suspected they were mostly rage and humiliation. You're taking everything out of context. I was trying to help you, to give you realistic expectations. No, I said firmly, you were trying to keep me small. Because somewhere, deep down, you knew that if I ever stood up, if I ever stopped believing your lies about my worth, I would surpass you. And that terrified you. Bryce stood, his napkin falling from his lap. He looked at Scarlett like he was seeing her for the first time. I need some air, he muttered, walking away from the table without looking back. Scarlett watched him go, then turned back to me with venom in her eyes. You're so proud of yourself, aren't you? You think you've won. But you're still just the same pathetic little girl, desperate for attention, desperate to be seen. This is all just a performance, Mia. Deep down, you're still nothing. I reached for the champagne flute the waiter had just placed before me. I took a small, deliberate sip, letting the bubbles dance on my tongue. Then I set the glass down and met her gaze with perfect calm. You know what the difference is between us, Scarlett? I spent years letting you define me, letting your words become my reality. I let you convince me that I was less than, that I should be grateful for whatever scraps of love and attention you deigned to throw my way. But one day, I woke up and realized something crucial. I leaned in slightly, my voice dropping to barely above a whisper, forcing her to strain to hear. Your opinion of me is none of my business. Your insecurity, your need to belittle others to feel superior, your desperate grasp for validation, none of that has anything to do with me. I stopped looking for your approval the day I realized I didn't need it. I stopped hoping you would see my worth the day I finally saw it myself. Scarlett grabbed her wineglass and hurled it at the floor. The crystal shattered with a dramatic crash, red wine spraying across the white tablecloth like blood. I hate you, she shrieked. You're still just the Cinderella nobody wanted, playing dress-up in borrowed clothes. I stood, smoothing down my dress, and smiled. You're right about one thing, Scarlett. I was Cinderella. I was the one covered in ashes, looked down upon, dismissed. But here's what you forgot about that story. Cinderella didn't need the prince to save her. She saved herself. She walked into that ball, owned her power, and showed everyone exactly who she was. And now, I gestured around the stunning restaurant, my restaurant. Now I own the castle. And you, dear sister, are just a guest who is rapidly wearing out her welcome. I turned to Mother, who had been silent throughout the entire exchange, her face a mask of conflicting emotions. Happy birthday, Mother. I hope you enjoy your evening. The meal is on the house, of course. Please, don't let this unpleasantness spoil your celebration. I walked away, my head high, my steps steady. Behind me, I heard Scarlett sobbing, heard Mother trying to calm her, heard the whispered conversations of shocked onlookers, but I did not look back. I had spent too much of my life looking back, wondering if they saw me, if they valued me, if they loved me. I was done looking back. The penthouse felt like a sanctuary when I returned. I kicked off my heels, feeling the plush carpet beneath my bare feet. The city stretched out before me, a million points of light against the darkness. I stood at the window, my arms wrapped around myself, and let the emotions finally come. I cried for the little girl who had tried so hard to earn love that should have been freely given. I cried for the teenager who had believed the lies about her worthlessness. I cried for the young woman who had sacrificed and struggled and worked herself to exhaustion, trying to prove she deserved to exist. And then I cried tears of relief, of release, of something that felt remarkably like freedom. My phone buzzed. A text from Scarlett. Mia, are you there? We need to talk. I stared at the message for a long moment, then set the phone down without responding. We did not need to talk. We had been talking, or rather, she had been talking at me for my entire life. Now, finally, I had said everything I needed to say. Another text came through, this time from Mother. Darling, please call me. I had no idea about so much. I am so sorry. I am so proud of you. That one made me pause. Mother, apologizing. Mother, proud. The words I had desperately wanted to hear for 28 years. But now, standing in my penthouse, wearing my success like armor, I realized something profound. Those words no longer had the power they once did. They were nice to receive, but they could not heal the years of neglect. They could not undo the damage of always being second, always being overlooked, always being not quite enough. But perhaps, with time and intention, they could be the beginning of something new. Not a return to the old dynamic, where I bent and twisted myself to fit their expectations, but a new relationship built on mutual respect and clear boundaries. I would respond to Mother, but not tonight. Tonight, I needed to be alone with my victory, to let it settle into my bones and become real. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the massive windows, painting everything gold. I woke slowly, luxuriously, in a bed so comfortable it felt like floating on clouds. For a moment, I simply lay there, savoring the absence of the constant anxiety that had been my companion for so long. There was a knock at the door. When I opened it, I found a hotel employee with a silver breakfast tray and a cream-colored envelope. From your mother, Miss Vance, he said with a warm smile. I took the envelope to the window seat, cradling a cup of perfect coffee, and opened it carefully. Mother's handwriting, always so elegant and precise, filled the single page. My dearest Amelia, it began, and just that, the use of my full name, made my throat tighten. I have been awake all night, thinking about yesterday evening and, if I am honest, about the last 28 years. I have failed you, my darling girl. I allowed Scarlett's forceful personality to overshadow your quiet strength. I mistook your grace and patience for a lack of ambition, your kindness for weakness. I see now how wrong I was, how blind I chose to be. You did not need me to believe in you to succeed, but I should have believed in you anyway. I am so incredibly proud of the woman you have become, and I am ashamed it took such a public revelation for me to truly see you. If you can forgive me, I would very much like to start over. With love and deepest regret, Mother. I read the letter 3 times. It was not perfect. It did not erase the past, but it was honest, and that mattered more than perfection ever could. Later that afternoon, Nathaniel Thorne invited me to his office to discuss the next phase of expansion. His office was exactly what I had expected. Old money elegance with modern functionality. He gestured for me to sit in one of the leather chairs across from his desk. That was quite an evening, he said with a slight smile. The staff is still talking about it. Several guests have called this morning asking about you, wanting to hire Parker's studio for their own projects. I laughed. I imagine Scarlett is also making calls this morning, though of a different nature. Indeed, she tried to have you banned from the hotel. His smile widened. I explained to her that banning the owner would be complicated. Owner. The word still felt surreal. When Nathaniel had first approached me about investing in the expansion, I had been terrified. It would take every penny I had saved, plus a significant loan. But I had believed in the project, believed in my vision, and most importantly, believed in myself. Now, I owned a 15% stake in one of Chicago's most prestigious hotels. I wanted to thank you, I said seriously, for everything. Not just for the opportunity, but for believing in my work even when no one else did. Nathaniel leaned back in his chair, studying me with those sharp, assessing eyes. Amelia, I believed in your work because it is exceptional. But what impressed me most about you was never your technical skill, though that is considerable. It was your humility. Very few people reach your level of success and maintain such grace. You let your work speak for itself instead of shouting about your accomplishments. When you spend half your life being underestimated, I said quietly, you learn that actions carry more weight than words. Perhaps, but now that the world knows who you are, what will you do next? I thought about that question. For so long, my motivation had been a mixture of survival and proving myself. But now I had proven myself beyond any doubt. So what came next? I want to create spaces that make people feel the way I felt last night, I said slowly, the idea forming as I spoke. Powerful, seen, worthy. Architecture is not just about buildings. It is about how those buildings make people feel, about the lives that unfold within them. I want to design places where people discover their own strength. Nathaniel smiled, a genuine warmth lighting his usually reserved features. Then I look forward to seeing what you create next. That evening, I did something I had not done in months. I went back to my old studio, the tiny space above a bakery in a not quite gentrified neighborhood where I had started Parker Studio Designs. The key still fit the lock. The space still smelled of coffee and sawdust and possibility. My old drafting table sat in the corner, covered with dust but still solid, still holding the ghost of countless dreams sketched and refined. On the wall, I had pinned some of my earliest designs, the ones I had created in the midst of doubt and fear and desperate hope. I found the battered suitcase in the closet, the one Scarlett had thrown across the marble floor of the grandeur. I ran my fingers over the scuffed exterior, tracing the journey it represented. This suitcase had been with me through every struggle, every setback, every small victory. It had held my possessions when I moved into my first apartment. It had carried my portfolio to my first major client meeting. It had been my constant companion through the worst and best days of my life. I could not throw it away. It was too much a part of my story, too honest a reminder of where I had come from. So I took it back to the penthouse, and I placed it carefully in the back of the walk-in closet, behind the designer clothes and expensive shoes. A secret talisman, a touchstone to reality, a promise to never forget the girl who had fought so hard to become the woman I was now. My phone rang. Mother's name appeared on the screen. I hesitated only a moment before answering. "Hello, Mother." "Amelia." Her voice was thick with emotion. "Thank you for answering. I was not sure you would. I read your letter. And I appreciate your honesty. It means more than you might think." There was a pause, the sound of her breathing. "I do not expect you to forgive me immediately. I know I have hurt you, neglected you in ways that no apology can fully address, but I would like to try. If you will let me, I would like to get to know my daughter, the real you, not the shadow I allowed you to become in Scarlett's presence." My eyes burned with unshed tears. "I would like that too. But Mother, things cannot go back to how they were. I need you to understand that." "I do understand," she said quietly. "You are not the little girl who needed my approval. You are a remarkable woman who built an empire from nothing. You do not need me. But perhaps, if you are willing, we could build something new. Not mother and overlooked daughter, but two women who happen to be related, learning to truly see each other." "I think I would like that," I said, surprised to find I meant it. We talked for over an hour, a real conversation, perhaps the first real conversation we had ever had. Mother asked about my work, about how I had built Parker Studio, about my dreams for the future. She shared things about her own youth, about the compromises she had made, about the ways she had let other people's expectations shape her life. She did not make excuses, but she offered context, and somehow that helped. "What about Scarlett?" I finally asked. "What happened after I left?" Mother sighed. "She is devastated. Bryce has asked for space to reconsider their engagement. She blames you, of course, but I think, deep down, she knows the truth. She has built her entire identity on being superior to you, and now that foundation has crumbled. She is going to have to face some very uncomfortable truths about herself." "I do not hate her," I said, surprising myself with the realization. "I am angry, yes. Hurt, absolutely. But I do not hate her. I pity her, actually. She has spent so much energy trying to keep me down that she never bothered to build anything real for herself. That is very generous of you. It is not generosity, it is just truth. Scarlett's life is her own to live or waste. I cannot control her choices, only my own. And I choose to stop letting her occupy space in my head and heart." After we hung up, I went to the balcony. The sun was setting, painting the Chicago skyline in shades of amber and rose. The city that had once seemed so daunting, so full of people who were more successful and more deserving than me, now felt like home, not because it had changed, but because I had. The next few weeks passed in a blur of activity. New clients reached out, drawn by the publicity and the quality of my work. I hired 2 new architects and a project manager, officially expanding Parker Studio. We moved into a proper office space, glass and steel and flooded with natural light, in one of Chicago's revitalized warehouse districts. Scarlett and I did not speak. Mother said she was going through therapy, trying to understand her own behaviors and patterns. Bryce had called off the engagement, though he had done it kindly, telling Scarlett that he loved her but could not marry someone who treated family with such casual cruelty. I felt a twinge of sympathy for her, but mostly I felt relief that I was no longer in her blast radius. Mother and I began having weekly lunches, careful at first, both of us navigating this new dynamic. She asked about my projects. I asked about her charity work. We talked about books and art and the city. We did not mention Scarlett unless necessary. Slowly, carefully, we built something that resembled a genuine relationship. 6 months after that fateful night at the grandeur, I received an unexpected visitor at my office. Scarlett stood in my waiting area, looking smaller somehow, less polished than usual. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. Her clothes, while still expensive, lacked her usual meticulous styling. "I know you probably do not want to see me," she said when I came out to meet her, "but I needed to say some things, and I needed to say them in person." I could have refused. I could have had my assistant show her out. But curiosity, and maybe a small kernel of hope, made me nod. Come into my office. She sat in the chair across from my desk, her hands twisting in her lap. For a long moment, she just looked around, taking in the space, the awards on the wall, the architectural models on the shelves. This is really impressive, she finally said. I mean, I knew it was real after that night, but seeing it, being here, it makes it more concrete. Thank you. I have been going to therapy, she blurted out, 3 times a week. My therapist says I have, well, a lot of issues around self-worth and control and sibling rivalry and a bunch of other psychological terms that basically mean I am a terrible person. You are not a terrible person, Scarlett. You have done terrible things, yes, but that is not the same as being irredeemable. She looked up, her eyes shining with tears. I do not know how to do this. How to apologize for 28 years of cruelty. How to explain that I was so insecure, so terrified that I was not good enough, that I made you into a punching bag for all my own fears and inadequacies. How to ask for forgiveness when I do not deserve it. I leaned back in my chair, studying her. She looked genuinely distraught, genuinely remorseful. But remorse was not enough, not after everything. Why now, Scarlett? Why, after all these years, are you suddenly seeing a therapist and having revelations? Because I lost everything, she said simply. Bryce left me. Half my friends stopped calling. Mother looks at me with disappointment. And you are thriving without me, without needing me, without even thinking about me. And I realized that I built my entire sense of self on being better than you, on making sure you stayed beneath me. Without that, I had nothing. I am nothing. That is not true, I said, and I meant it. You are more than your worst behaviors. But Scarlett, you cannot build yourself up by tearing others down. You cannot find worth through comparison. You have to find it in yourself, for yourself. I know, she whispered. I know that now. It is just, I do not know how. I do not know who I am when I am not the beautiful one, the successful one, the favorite one. I have spent my whole life performing, and I forgot to build anything real underneath the performance. I felt something in my chest soften, just slightly. This was not the Scarlett I had grown up with, the one who wielded cruelty like a weapon. This was a broken woman trying to piece herself back together. I cannot tell you how to find yourself, I said gently. That is work only you can do. But I will say this, stop comparing yourself to others. Stop measuring your worth by external validation. Figure out what you actually care about, what brings you joy, what kind of person you want to be when no one is watching, and then start becoming that person. Can you forgive me? She asked, her voice small. Someday? I thought about it, really thought about it. Could I forgive her? The answer was complicated. She had caused me immense pain, had shaped my self-image in cruel and damaging ways, had stolen years of confidence and peace from me. But holding on to that anger was like drinking poison and expecting her to die. Forgiveness was not about excusing her behavior or pretending it did not happen. It was about releasing myself from the burden of carrying that pain forever. I do not know, I answered honestly. Maybe someday. But Scarlett, forgiveness is not a light switch. It is a process. You are going to have to prove through consistent actions, over a long period of time, that you have actually changed. Words are easy. Behavior is what matters. She nodded, wiping at her eyes. That is fair. More than fair. And I want you to know something, I continued. My success is not about you. It never was. I did not build this empire to prove you wrong or to get revenge or to show you up. I built it because I love what I do, because I have a vision and talent and the determination to make it real. Your opinion of me, positive or negative, does not define my worth. I understand. She stood, smoothing down her skirt with shaking hands. Thank you for seeing me. I know I did not deserve even that much. As she turned to leave, I felt compelled to say one more thing. Scarlett, for what it is worth, I hope you find whatever it is you are looking for. I hope you learn to be happy with who you are, instead of who you think you should be. She looked back, a sad smile on her face. Thank you, Mia. Amelia, thank you. After she left, I sat in my office for a long time, thinking about family, about forgiveness, about the weight of the past and the possibility of the future. I did not trust Scarlett's transformation yet. I could not. She had a long way to go, and frankly, whether she made that journey or not was no longer my concern. What mattered was that I had made my journey. I had walked through fire and emerged, not unscathed, but stronger. I had learned that my worth did not depend on anyone's approval or recognition. I had discovered that silence could be more powerful than shouting, that patience could be more effective than aggression, that building something real was infinitely more satisfying than tearing others down. That evening, I returned to the penthouse at the Grandeur. Nathaniel had offered to let me buy it outright, but I had declined. It was too much space for one person, and besides, I liked having the option to leave, to not be tied down. I had purchased a lovely brownstone in Lincoln Park instead, a place that was mine but not pretentious, comfortable but not ostentatious. But tonight, I wanted to be here, in this space that represented everything I had overcome and achieved. I went to the closet and retrieved the battered suitcase, bringing it out to the living room. I sat on the floor beside it, running my hands over its surface like a talisman. This suitcase had carried my dreams when I had nothing else. It had been a symbol of my poverty, yes, but also of my determination. Every scuff, every worn corner, every loose thread represented a moment when I had chosen to keep going, to keep believing, to keep building. I unzipped it and found, tucked into the inside pocket, something I had forgotten about, a photograph of me at my art institute graduation. I was younger, thinner, exhausted from working 3 jobs. But my smile was genuine, full of hope and possibility. I had been so proud that day, even knowing that Scarlett had not bothered to attend, even knowing that Mother had left early to go to some social engagement. I had been enough, even then. I had always been enough. I just had not known it yet. My phone buzzed. A text from Nathaniel. "Would you like to join me for dinner? I have an idea for the next project I think you'll find intriguing." I smiled. Always another project, another challenge, another opportunity to create something meaningful. I stood, leaving the suitcase open on the floor, that photograph visible. A reminder. A monument to the girl I had been and the woman I had become. 3 years later, I stood on another rooftop, this time in New York City, at the opening of my latest project, a mixed-use development that combined affordable housing with commercial space and green areas, all designed to foster community and connection. The mayor was giving a speech, praising Parker Studios' commitment to socially responsible design. Mother was there, beaming with genuine pride. We had rebuilt our relationship slowly, carefully, establishing new patterns and boundaries. She was not perfect, and neither was I, but we had found a way to love each other that felt healthy and real. Scarlett was not there. She had moved to Seattle 6 months ago, taking a position with an environmental nonprofit. She sent occasional emails, updates on her life and progress. She was still in therapy, still working on herself. We were not close, and maybe we never would be, but the sharp edge of hostility had dulled into something more like distant cordiality. That was enough. My team from Parker Studio surrounded me, celebrating this achievement. We had grown to 15 employees, each one chosen for their talent and their commitment to using design as a force for good. We were profitable, yes, but more importantly, we were making a difference. As the sun set over Manhattan, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, I thought about that night at the Grandeur, about the woman in emerald green who had finally claimed her power. She felt like a different person now, someone I had been but no longer needed to be. I did not need to prove anything anymore. I did not need to perform or defend or justify my existence. I just needed to be. And I was. Fully, completely, unapologetically. My assistant approached with champagne. I took a glass, raising it in a silent toast to the girl who had carried a battered suitcase and a heart full of dreams, who had survived belittlement and neglect, who had learned to value herself even when no one else did. That girl had become this woman, and this woman had learned the most important lesson of all. The only person's approval she ever needed was her own. The city lights began to twinkle as darkness fell, and I smiled, content in the knowledge that I had not just survived my past. I had transformed it into strength, into purpose, into a life worth living. They had called me Cinderella, the overlooked daughter covered in ashes, but I had taken those ashes and forged them into something brilliant and unbreakable. I had built my own castle, written my own story, and created my own happily ever after. And it was sweeter than any fairy tale ever written.